the heart of the Great War. Amidst a landscape scarred by conflict, one battle stands as a monument to human endurance and unimaginable suffering. This is the story of Verdun. For 10 months in 1916, this small French city became the epicenter of the most brutal, relentless, and longest battle in modern history. It wasn't just a fight for territory, it was a battle for the very soul of a nation, a meat grinder designed to bleed an army to death. The year is 1916. The Western Front is a static, bleeding wound stretching across Europe. German Chief of Staff Erich von Falkenhayn conceives a chilling strategy. He doesn't aim to break through the French lines, not in the traditional sense. His goal is far more sinister: to attack a point the French cannot afford to lose, forcing them to throw every last man into its defense. He chose Verdun. Verdun was a symbol of French pride, a historic fortress city. Losing it was unthinkable. Falkenhayn's plan was simple and horrifying. He would turn Verdun into a mill to grind the French army into dust, to bleed France white. On the morning of February 21st, 1916, the storm broke. An artillery bombardment of unprecedented scale began. Over 1 million shells rained down on the French positions in just the first 9 hours. It was a hurricane of steel and fire, a deluge that obliterated trenches, vaporized soldiers, and churned the very earth into a hellscape. The Germans called it Trommelfeuer, drumfire. For the French soldiers huddled in their dugouts, it was the end of the world. Forests were reduced to splinters, the ground trembled as if from a constant earthquake, and the sky turned a permanent, hazy gray from smoke and dust. Following this inferno, elite German stormtroopers advanced, expecting to find nothing but shell-shocked survivors. They captured key positions, including the mighty Fort Douaumont, one of the most powerful forts surrounding Verdun, which fell with shocking ease. Panic began to ripple through the French high command. Verdun was on the brink of collapse. It seemed Falkenhayn's brutal calculation was proving correct. But then, something changed. A new commander was appointed to lead the defense of Verdun, General Philippe Pétain. He reorganized the shattered French lines and, more importantly, he understood the true nature of this battle. He established a vital supply line, a single road leading into the city. It would become known as the Voie Sacrée, the sacred way. Day and night, a constant stream of trucks, some 6,000 of them, ferried men, ammunition, and supplies into the furnace of Verdun and carried the wounded out. This logistical lifeline was the artery that kept the defense alive. Pétain also implemented a rotation system. No soldier would be left to endure the hell of the front lines indefinitely. Units were rotated in and out, ensuring a constant flow of fresh, albeit terrified, troops. This system meant that over the course of the battle, a staggering 70% of the entire French army would fight at Verdun. It became a national ordeal, a shared experience of suffering that bound the army and the country together. On the battlefield, a new defiant spirit took hold. It was captured in a simple, powerful phrase, a rallying cry that echoed from the trenches and across France. Ils ne passeront pas, they shall not pass. This wasn't just a slogan, it was a sacred vow. French soldiers, known as poilus, or the hairy ones, clung to their positions with ferocious tenacity. They fought in a lunar landscape of mud-filled craters, among the ruins of forts and villages that had been pulverized into non-existence. Life in the trenches was a living nightmare. Soldiers lived in constant fear of artillery, which accounted for the vast majority of casualties. The noise was incessant, a mind-shattering roar that never stopped. They contended with mud that could swallow a man whole, swarms of rats that fed on the dead, and the constant stench of decay. Snipers, machine guns, and poison gas were ever-present threats. Flamethrowers, a terrifying new weapon, turned bunkers into incinerators. Hand-to-hand combat in the dark, narrow confines of a trench was a frequent, savage reality. Villages like Fleury-Vendôme, changed hands 16 times. Fort Vaux, under the command of Major Sylvain Eugene Reynaud, held out for a week against overwhelming odds. Its defenders fighting in pitch-black tunnels, eventually forced to surrender only when they ran completely out of water. Their heroic resistance became legendary, a testament to the "they shall not pass" spirit. As the months dragged on, the battle's nature shifted. The German offensive began to stall. The cost was becoming as unbearable for them as it was for the French. The German army was also being bled white in the very mill Falkenhayn had created. The launch of the British-led Somme offensive in July forced the Germans to divert troops and resources away from Verdun, giving the French a crucial reprieve. Slowly, painstakingly, the French began to counterattack. In the autumn, under the command of General Robert Nivelle and his subordinate Charles Mangin, they launched meticulously planned offensives, using a new tactic called the creeping barrage, where artillery fire moved forward just ahead of the advancing infantry. They began to reclaim lost ground. In October, Fort Douaumont was recaptured. In December, after a final major push, the French had retaken most of the territory they had lost in the initial onslaught. The battle finally ground to a halt, not with a decisive victory, but with mutual, sheer exhaustion, when the guns finally fell silent after 300 days and nights of continuous fighting. The cost was staggering. The battlefield was a wasteland, a dead zone where nothing would grow for decades. The human toll was beyond comprehension. It's estimated there were over 700,000 casualties killed, wounded, or missing. That's an average of over 70,000 a month. The ground around Verdun is still littered with the remains of soldiers, and the ossuary at Douaumont holds the bones of 130,000 unidentified French and German soldiers, a silent, solemn reminder of the slaughter. Verdun was not a strategic victory for either side in the traditional sense. The front lines had barely moved, but for France it was a profound moral victory. They had held, they had not been broken. The battle became a cornerstone of French national identity in the 20th century, a symbol of sacrifice and resilience. For Germany, it was a catastrophic failure, a battle that fatally weakened their army and contributed to their eventual defeat. The Battle of Verdun stands as a stark lesson in the futility of industrial warfare. It was a battle of attrition in its purest, most horrible form. A place where human beings were treated as little more than raw material to be fed into the machinery of war. It teaches us about the extremes of human cruelty, but also about the incredible depths of courage, endurance, and the will to resist in the face of annihilation. The legacy of Verdun is written in the soil, in the memorials, and in the collective memory of a world that should never forget the price of ILS ni passarant. Thank you for watching. If you found this history meaningful, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more deep dives into the pivotal moments that shaped our world.